The slap echoed across a ballroom full of billionaires. Nobody moved. Nicole Richardson stood under the chandelier in a long emerald green silk gown, the fabric still trembling from the impact. Black, beautiful, slender, 30 years old. Manhattan's most respected art curator. The woman who had built that gala from the first invitation to the last brushstroke on the wall. Richard Blackwell lowered his hand. Oil money, 58. Gray hair slicked back, gold cufflinks catching the light. He smiled like a man who had never been told no. He hadn't seen the man on the mezzanine yet. Han Do-jin watched from the VIP balcony. Black Italian suit, a discreet tattoo climbing the side of his neck, disappearing under the collar. 35. Daejong of the most powerful Korean syndicate, quietly expanding across the United States. His Korean security stood at the corners of the room, earpieces in, faces blank. He set his glass on a passing tray. He didn't blink. For 3 years, only one detail in that room knew the truth. A thin wedding band, hidden against Nicole's skin under the neckline of the gown. Do-jin began to descend the stairs. The elite of 2 continents held their champagne and didn't dare breathe. And what he whispered when he lifted Blackwell off the floor by the throat. Before starting the story, comment down below where you are watching from and what time it is there. If stories of karma, love, and hidden truths move you, leave a like, be sure to subscribe to the channel, and click join to become a member and help our channel. The flashbulbs caught her first. Nicole Richardson stepped through the brass doors of the Sterling Pavilion, and the photographers detonated. Light fractured off the emerald silk pouring down her body. The gown moved like water. She did not blink. She did not slow. She gave them 3 seconds of her face, the chin tilt, the soft mouth, the eyes that knew exactly what they were doing, and then she kept walking, and the press kept screaming her name like she was a country they had just discovered. A young reporter shoved a microphone over the velvet rope. "Miss Richardson, is it true tonight's auction will break records? Is it true the Klimt is the centerpiece?" She smiled without stopping. "Come inside and see." The doors closed behind her, and the lobby swallowed the noise. Inside, the air was different, cooler, hushed by carpet and money. Crystal chandeliers hung in 3 tiers from a ceiling painted with constellations, and beneath them, Manhattan's old families and new fortunes were already drinking champagne out of glasses they had never paid for. Nicole moved through them like she had built the room, because, in every way that mattered, she had. This was her gala, her guest list, her catalog. 340 pieces, 12 sponsors, 1 Klimt nobody had seen in public since 1962. The board had told her, 18 months ago, that a 30-year-old curator was too young to be trusted with the auction of the year. She had thanked them, gone home, and built the thing alone. Now they were calling her brilliant. She let her hand rest, briefly, on the back of a junior curator she had hired 6 months ago. A quick, steadying touch. The kind that said, "You're doing fine, keep breathing," and kept moving, toward the mezzanine stairs, toward the place where the light was best, toward the place where, she knew, he was already watching. She did not look up. 3 years of practice, 3 years of pretending, 3 years of not looking up. A waiter offered her a flute. She refused it with 2 fingers. Her stomach was a tight, beautiful knot, and champagne would only soften her. Tonight, she needed edges. Nicole, my God. Diana Voss. Old money, older diamonds, voice like a cigarette held too long. The woman air-kissed both of Nicole's cheeks without making contact and stepped back to assess the dress. "Tell me you didn't make this," Diana said. "I commissioned it." "Soul." Diana raised one painted eyebrow. "Soul. A young designer. Nobody yet. He will be. Of course he will." Diana's eyes drifted, professional, down the green silk and back up to Nicole's collarbones. "And the necklace?" Nicole's hand moved before she thought. A small, automatic gesture, fingertips touching the hollow of her throat where a thin platinum chain disappeared beneath the neckline of the gown. Down, down into the silk, to the place where a single ring rode against her sternum, warm from her own skin, hidden inside the dress like a second heartbeat. "A gift," she said. "From a friend." Diana's mouth curled. "Generous friend." "Very." The older woman drifted off in a cloud of jasmine and judgment, and Nicole let out a slow breath through her nose. The ring shifted against her ribs as she inhaled. She did not adjust it. She never adjusted it. Adjusting it would have made it real to someone watching. It was already real. She had worn it on her finger for exactly 47 minutes, 3 years ago, in a temple outside Busan, under a roof of black tile and a sky the color of wet steel. He had slid it onto her hand in front of one priest, one witness, and no cameras. Then they had eaten pine nut porridge in silence, and she had taken the ring off her finger before the car reached the airport, and she had put it on the chain, and she had not taken it off since. He had wanted the ceremony anonymous. She had insisted on it. You don't marry a man like Han Do-jin in public. You don't tell the world a thing the world can take from you. Nicole. She turned. The voice was warm, familiar, harmless. Marcus Hale, sponsor. Oil adjacent in a way she didn't ask about, with a wife she liked and a daughter at Brown. He kissed her cheek properly. "You've outdone yourself," he said. The Klimt. "My God, how did you get it?" "Patience." "That's not an answer. That's the only answer I'm giving." He laughed and let her go. She kept moving. She had learned, over 3 years, that movement was a language. If she stood still too long in a room like this, someone would try to fill the silence around her with their own narrative. So she moved. Always moved. The dress moved with her. The mezzanine ran along the east wall, a long sweep of brass railing and red velvet, lit warmer than the floor below so the people up there looked like portraits hung above the crowd. She allowed her gaze to graze it, just once, just long enough to count. 6, 8, 10 dark suits, evenly spaced, earpieces. Korean men, none of them older than 45. All of them standing the way men stood when they had been trained to stand for hours. And in the center of the railing, by himself, one shoulder against a column, him. She did not let her eyes settle. She let them slide. Practiced. Smooth. The way you would glance at a beautiful painting you did not own. He was wearing the black suit, the one with no notch, no flare, no jewelry, no anything. His hair was pulled straight back from his forehead, and his hand was around the stem of a wine glass he was not drinking, and his face was doing the thing his face did in public, which was almost nothing at all. For 1 second, his eyes found hers across the room. He did not nod, he did not smile, he did not move a single muscle, but the corner of his mouth pulled, 0.5 millimeter, inside, where nobody else would see it. It was enough. It was always enough. She felt the ring against her sternum like a small hot coin, and she dropped her gaze, and she kept walking. The catalog tent was tucked behind a Japanese screen at the back of the hall. Her assistant, Priya, was already there, headset crooked, tablet glowing. "Lot 114 just hit 2.1, Priya whispered, "and we haven't even opened the floor yet. The online bidders are bleeding out." "Where's the Klimt?" "Sealed. 2 guards. We open the case at 10:15 exactly. Hold it to 10:20. Make them wait." Priya almost smiled. "You are evil. I am a curator. Same thing." Nicole turned to step back out, and her phone buzzed once, soft, against the small interior pocket she had sewn into the lining of the gown herself. She slid it out. The screen showed no name, just a single character. A Korean syllable she had learned to read before she had learned to say it. Nampyeon. Husband. The message under it was 4 English words. "Eat something. You're pale." She stared at it. She did not smile. Smiling at her phone in a room like this would have been a confession. but she felt the warmth climb up the back of her neck, and she felt the ring shift, and she typed back with her thumb without looking down. "I'm fine." The reply came so fast he must have been holding the device. "You're not. The tray by the south column. The little crab thing. Eat too." She put the phone away. She walked, calm, unhurried, to the south column. The tray was there. The little crab thing was there. She took two. She ate them standing up, with her back to the mezzanine, so the man who had ordered her to eat could see exactly that she had obeyed him, and exactly that she would never let him see her obey him. That was the arrangement. 3 years of arrangement. In private, she answered him in 2 languages, and let him braid her hair when she could not sleep. In public, she did not know his name. She did not know his face. If you had asked her, on the floor of this gala, whether she had ever spoken to Han Do-jin, she would have tilted her head and let her eyes go soft, and said, "Who?" That was the deal. That was the wall. That was the only way a Black American art curator and the daejang of the most patient Korean empire ever to slip into the United States could stand inside the same chandelier light without lighting the whole city on fire. She finished the second crab. She wiped her fingers on a linen square. She walked on. The hall had filled. She could feel it now in her shoulders. 800 guests, give or take. 3 networks, 2 streaming crews, a small army of private security she had not hired and had not been told about, men in black suits she did not recognize from her own roster, men who were standing at every doorway and every stairwell and the back of every camera platform. His men. He had brought his own people into her gala without asking her, and she was going to be furious with him about it later. In their bedroom, in a low voice, in the dark. And he was going to listen with his hands behind his back and his eyes on the floor, and then he was going to say, in that quiet way of his, "I will not apologize for keeping you alive," and she was going to lose the argument because she always lost that argument. For now, she let the men stand where he had put them. She crossed the floor in a slow diagonal, greeting a senator by name without breaking stride, redirecting a documentary producer to her press lead with a flick of her wrist, signaling Priya to push the temperature of the room down by 2 degrees before the second act of the auction. Her body was an instrument. Every nod she gave was a transaction. Every smile she withheld was a price. She had learned this from her grandmother, in a small house on Auburn Avenue, where a Black woman with a 3rd-grade education had run a hair salon for 36 years and had taught Nicole exactly one thing about power. When you walk into a room, decide who is going to be embarrassed if they don't say hello to you first, and then make them work for it. She had decided, tonight, that everyone in this room was going to work for it. A bell rang softly. The lights dimmed in the main hall. The Klimt was about to be unveiled. She slipped to the side and let the spotlight find the painting without her. That was the rule. The work first, the curator second. Always. The crowd inhaled together as the velvet fell away, and gold and silver leaf caught the light, and a low, reverent sound moved through the room, the kind of sound humans only make in churches and museums, and the first 30 seconds of an earthquake. She watched the painting. She did not watch the people watching the painting. There was only one face in the room she wanted to look at, and she could not let herself look at it twice. Her phone buzzed. The same Korean character, Nampyeon. You did this. 3 words. She let her thumb hover over the screen, then she typed back, fast, careless, the way she only let herself type when she knew nobody could see. We did. The reply was a single dot. A period. Nothing else. From any other man it would have been rudeness. From him it was the closest thing to laughter he ever allowed himself in writing. She tucked the phone away. The auction roared back to life. Paddles. Numbers. A bidding war over the Basquiat that ended in a standing ovation. Nicole moved through the back of the hall like a current under ice. Invisible, directional, in charge. Twice she caught herself almost reaching for the chain at her throat. Twice she stopped her own hand. The ring rode against her sternum, and she walked. At 9:40, she took the small staircase to the side stage. The microphone was already live, the lights tilted toward her, and 800 faces tilted with them, and Nicole Richardson stepped into the heat and let the room see her properly for the first time. "Good evening." The room hushed. "My name is Nicole Richardson. I am the chief curator of this house. And tonight, you are going to spend an obscene amount of money on beautiful things." A ripple of laughter. Money laughter, the good kind. "You will spend it on a Klimt that has not been seen in public in 63 years. You will spend it on a Basquiat the artist himself once tried to set on fire. You will spend it on 3 pieces by women whose names you have not yet learned, and will, by the end of the decade, never forget." She let the pause sit. "You will spend it because beauty deserves a price, and because the artists who made these works did not eat for the privilege of being remembered after they were dead. Tonight we feed the living ones. Bid generously, bid loudly, bid as if your great-grandchildren will read about it." The applause came in like a tide. She bowed her head once, exactly the right depth, and stepped back from the microphone. As she came down the side steps, she lifted her eyes, just once, to the mezzanine. He was still there, still against the column. The wine glass had not moved. His face had not moved. But his hand, the one not holding the glass, had come up to the brass railing, and his thumb was pressed flat against it, white at the knuckle, the way a man pressed something when he was holding back the rest of his body from doing what it wanted to do. She read it like a sentence. "You were perfect." She let her gaze fall again. She walked back into the crowd. The ring, against her sternum, was so warm now it almost burned. By 11, the auction was halfway through, and the room was drunk on its own appetite. Paddles were going up like prayer flags. Nicole stood at the back, headset on, murmuring numbers into Priya's ear, and watching the floor with the cold, focused stillness of a conductor in the last movement. She did not see Richard Blackwell until he was already 3 feet away. He had come from behind her. Oil money, 60-something, slicked steel hair, short-clipped beard, eyes the wrong shade of blue, too pale, too watery, the color of something left out in the sun. He was wearing a tuxedo cut by someone in London who should have refused the commission. His watch alone was worth a car. "Miss Richardson." "Mr. Blackwell." She did not turn fully. She gave him a quarter of her body, a polite quarter, the kind reserved for sponsors and senators, and men who had not yet earned more. "Quite a show," he said. His voice was warm, and his eyes were not. "Quite a dress." "Thank you. Walk with me a moment. I'm working. It's important. So is this." He laughed. It was not a kind laugh. It was the laugh of a man who had been told no twice in his life. Once by his mother, once by a Saudi prince, and had not enjoyed either time. He stepped closer, close enough that she could smell the bourbon under the cologne. "Miss Richardson," he said, softer, almost intimate. "I have given this institution $2.4 million in the last 6 years. I would like 5 minutes of your evening, in private." She turned, finally, all the way. She looked up into his face. He was tall, and he liked being tall, and she did not give him the satisfaction of tilting her chin more than half an inch. "Mr. Blackwell," she said, voice low and clean, "you have given this institution money, not me. I am very grateful for your patronage. I am also working. If you would like to discuss the collection, my office hours begin Monday at 9. She smiled. It was the smile she had practiced in front of mirrors. It was the smile her mother had taught her in Atlanta when she was 11 years old, sitting in a kitchen that smelled like cornbread, learning the exact shape a black girl's mouth had to make to refuse a powerful white man without giving him a single reason to be angry. She turned to walk away. His hand closed around her wrist. Light, friendly, too long. "Don't," he said, still smiling for the room. "Be like that." Up on the mezzanine, against the brass railing, the wine glass tilted exactly 1 degree to the left. She did not see it. She felt it. The penthouse held its breath after he left. Nicole stood at the floor-to-ceiling window for a long time, the kiss on her forehead still warm, the city of Manhattan stretched out below her like a circuit board lit from inside. She did not turn on more lights. She liked the silence after he was gone, because the silence still carried him. She walked to the kitchen island in bare feet. There was a small black box waiting on the marble. No card, no ribbon. Han Do-jin never left cards. Cards could be photographed. Cards could be sold. Inside the box sat a single hairpin shaped like a thin gold leaf, the spine engraved with 2 Korean characters, so small they read like a whisper. She knew what they meant. She had learned them in the 2nd month of their marriage. She slid the pin into the inner pocket of her robe and exhaled. That was how he loved her. In objects no one would ever notice. 3 years of marriage. 3 years of a life nobody in her world suspected. Her closest friends still called her single. Her assistant still scheduled blind dates that Nicole canceled with polite excuses. Her own mother in Atlanta still asked, every Sunday on the phone, when Nicole would finally settle down. Nicole always laughed and said, "Soon, Mama, soon." And then she would hang up and stare at the ring she kept on a thin platinum chain under her blouse, the diamond resting between her collarbones like a second heart. The rule had been Do-jin's. On the night he proposed, they were in Seoul, in a private dining room above the river. He had not gotten down on one knee. He had simply looked at her across a low table and said, in his quiet, measured English, "If you marry me, the world cannot know, not for a long time, maybe not ever." She had asked him why. He had answered without softening the truth. "Because there are men in 3 countries who would kill you to hurt me. Your name will be currency to them the day they learn it." She had said yes that same night. She had not slept that same night. She had stared at the ceiling, thinking about every consequence, every silence, every birthday she would have to spend pretending, and then she had decided. Some women got candles and beaches. She got a man whose love came wrapped in the architecture of his own danger. She would take it. The intimacy that grew between them after that was a strange and beautiful thing. They could not be seen together, so they invented a private country, a country with its own language of gestures. When they passed each other at a charity dinner, he would touch the rim of his glass with 2 fingers, and that meant, "I see you, my love." When she wanted him to leave a room because someone had said something that put her teeth on edge, she would tuck her hair behind her right ear, and within 90 seconds, he would create a reason to extract her without a single eye in the room understanding it had happened. When he was traveling, he sent her flowers under another woman's name to her gallery, and the card always said the same nonsense phrase, "For the Tuesday meeting," and she would smile, because Tuesday was the night they had first slept in the same bed and never spoken of it again. In the bedroom of the penthouse, he was a different man entirely. The cold, calculating gaze that intimidated boardrooms and broken men into stammering apologies softened the moment the door closed. He cooked for her, badly and with great seriousness. He braided her hair on Sunday mornings while she read auction catalogs, his big hands surprisingly patient, his Korean grandmother's lullabies hummed under his breath. He learned her body the way a scholar learns a manuscript, slowly, with reverence, with no rush, because rush was a currency he refused to spend on her. But the second they stepped into the corridor, he became Dae-jang again, and she became Miss Richardson, the art curator, who took a private elevator down to a car, driven by a man named Mr. Park who would never, in this life or the next, betray a single thing he had seen. It cost her. She would not pretend it did not. There were nights she lay awake furious at the photographers who hounded actresses she did not even admire while she, the woman who had married one of the most dangerous men on the eastern seaboard, walked into her own openings alone. Furious at the way men at parties asked her if she was seeing anyone, and she had to smile and say, "No, I am focused on my work," when what she wanted to say was, "I am the wife of a man who could end your career with a phone call. Do not touch my arm again." She told him, more than once, in the dark, in their bed, that she would not be a kept secret forever. "I am not asking to wear your name on a billboard," she had said one night, 3 months ago, her cheek on his chest. "I am asking to be respected for what I built. With my own hands, before you. I built my gallery. I built my reputation. I built the rooms I stand in. When this changes, when the world knows, I will not be introduced as your wife. I will be introduced as Nicole Richardson, who happens to be married to you. Do you understand the difference?" He had been silent for a long time, the kind of silence that in any other man would have meant offense. In him it meant calculation, weighing, the slow arrangement of a future across a chessboard only he could see. "I understand," he had said finally. "When it changes, it will change on your terms. The world will learn your name first, mine second. I will stand behind you in the photograph, not in front." She had cried then, quietly, and he had pretended not to notice, because he knew her well enough to know she did not want to be comforted in that moment. She wanted to be heard. He had heard her. That was enough. Now, alone in the kitchen at 11:48 at night, she opened her phone and looked at the next 30 days of her calendar. There was only one event in bold: the Blackwell Foundation Annual Gala for Contemporary Art, Saturday, the 14th. The Met's Temple of Dendur wing, rented entirely, transformed by a team she had personally selected. 112 guests, curators from 6 countries, collectors whose phone numbers were not in any directory, heirs from families older than the Republic, 83 lots of contemporary art, estimated hammer total above $40 million, half of it routed to a children's hospital in Queens that she had also personally chosen. Her name on the program, in letters 1 inch tall, organized by Nicole Richardson. She had built this gala from a sketch on a napkin into the most anticipated cultural event of the autumn season in Manhattan. Every detail had passed under her hand: the catering, the floor plan, the string ensemble, the exact angle of the lighting that would fall on each canvas, the placement of every name card on every dinner table. She had not slept more than 5 hours a night in 2 months. She had walked the empty wing of the museum at 3 in the morning, with a clipboard and a measuring tape, because she did not trust anyone else to verify the distance between the central fountain and the auctioneer's podium. This was hers, not his, hers. Do-jin had asked, weeks earlier, if she wanted him to send a discreet team to assist with logistics. She had laughed and kissed him and told him to stay out of her gala. He had smiled. He had not pushed. He had said only one thing: "I will attend." From the mezzanine, "You will not see me work, but I will be there." She had agreed. She always agreed to him being in the room. It was the one thing she insisted on. The next morning came gray and slow over the East River. Nicole woke at 6, the gold leaf pin still in her robe pocket where she had left it. She made coffee herself, the way she always did, because the housekeeper did not arrive until 9, and Nicole needed those 3 hours alone before the city remembered her name. At 8, the phone on the marble counter lit up. "Unknown number," she answered. The voice on the other end was Korean, female, polite to the edge of impersonal. "Madam, 2 cars at the curb at 11, the driver is Mr. Park. Your stylist is already informed." The line went dead. Nicole smiled at the empty kitchen. He never called her himself before noon. He sent women he had never met to deliver his logistics, because a woman calling a woman raised no flags in any phone record, anywhere. At 11, the black car was at the curb. She wore sunglasses, a camel coat, no jewelry. Mr. Park opened the door without a word, drove without a word, delivered her to the side entrance of a salon on the Upper East Side without a word. The stylist was waiting with hot tea and a printout of the hairstyle they had agreed on 6 weeks earlier. Classic Hollywood curly bob, voluminous, chin length, the kind of silhouette that would carry across a room photographed from any angle. For 4 hours, Nicole sat in a chair and let the city happen to other women on the street outside. She read her notes for the gala. She memorized the names of the 7 new collectors who had flown in from Geneva and Singapore. She rehearsed, in her head, the brief welcome address she would deliver at exactly 8:47, between the third and fourth lots. At 3, she was home. The dress went onto the steel form in the dressing room. The emerald earrings, the pair, came out of the safe and were set on a small velvet tray. She did not put them on yet. She had a rule about jewelry. Jewelry was for after the dress, not before. At 4, her phone buzzed. A single line of Korean. She did not speak it well, but she read it well enough. He had sent her 3 characters that meant, in their private translation, "You are already the room." She pressed her hand flat against the phone and held it there for a long second, the way another woman would press a hand to her own heart. She put the phone down and walked to the closet. The dress was already hanging there, sheathed in a black garment bag with no label. Emerald green silk, hand-stitched in Milan, cut to follow her like water. She had stood for 7 fittings to get the drape across the hip exactly right. Tomorrow afternoon she would have her hair set by a stylist who had been with her since she was 23, and who had never asked her a single personal question, which was why she had stayed. She unzipped the bag halfway, just to look. The fabric breathed under the closet light. She brushed 2 fingers across the bodice, the way a sculptor brushes a finished piece. "Saturday," she said quietly, to the dress, to the empty closet, to herself. "Saturday, you stand for me." She zipped the bag and turned off the light. Across the city, 28 floors above Park Avenue, Han Do-jin sat at a long black desk in a private office, no public directory listed. 2 men stood at the door. 3 more sat on a low couch with their hands folded. None of them spoke unless spoken to. On the screen in front of him was a guest list. The same guest list Nicole had finalized 2 weeks earlier. He had a copy because Mr. Park had a copy, and Mr. Park had a copy because that was what Mr. Park was paid to obtain. Do-jin had not interfered with a single name on her list. He had only studied them. His eyes stopped on the same name they had stopped on for the last 11 days. Richard Blackwell, American billionaire, oil, 58 years old, 3 divorces, 2 settled assault complaints. A reputation among the women of 3 boroughs that the women of those 3 boroughs did not speak about in mixed company, because Blackwell's lawyers were patient, and his memory was longer than his decency. He had purchased the title sponsorship of the gala for a sum that allowed him to put his foundation's name on the printed program. He had also, according to a quiet line in a quiet report on Do-jin's desk, asked a junior assistant at Nicole's gallery, twice, in the last month, whether Miss Richardson was attached to anyone. The assistant had said no, because the assistant did not know. Do-jin tapped the edge of his glass once with 2 fingers. The man closest to the door inclined his head and stepped out without a word. He returned 90 seconds later with another folder. Do-jin opened it, read, closed it. His expression did not change. He pulled up a second screen. Architectural plans of the Temple of Dendur Wing. Every camera, every exit, every column. He had memorized them already. He pulled them up again only because it was Friday night, and on Friday nights, the night before the gala, he allowed himself one more rehearsal of every angle of the room she would walk into. The mezzanine ran along the eastern wall. From it, a single staircase, 22 steps, descended to the main floor at a 30-degree angle. The bottom of the staircase opened directly onto the central aisle between the auction rows. 8 seconds, he had timed it that morning in his head. 8 seconds from the railing to the floor at a walking pace. 6 seconds if he moved with intention. 4 seconds if he moved with violence. He had stood up from his desk and walked the imaginary staircase twice in his office, his men pretending not to watch, his shoes silent on the carpet. He had not yet decided which pace he would use. That would depend on what the room gave him. He did not believe in deciding in advance the speed at which a man should be made to understand he had touched what was not his. "Saturday," he said. The room understood. The men on the couch nodded once and stood. The meeting was over without a single voice raised above the register of a calm dinner conversation. Alone again, He reached into the inner pocket of his jacket and took out a small velvet pouch. Inside was a single emerald earring, the match to a pair he had given her on their first anniversary, the pair she would be wearing on Saturday night. He had kept this third stone separate, just in case. He turned it once between his thumb and forefinger, watching the way the gala lights of his imagination would have hit it. Then he put it back in the pouch, and the pouch back in his pocket, and he closed his eyes for exactly 6 seconds. When he opened them, he was Daejang again. Across the city, Nicole was already asleep. She had taken off the platinum chain and placed her ring inside the black box beside the gold leaf pin, both of them tucked into the drawer with the false bottom that Mr. Park had once explained to her in 2 sentences and never mentioned again. Saturday was 3 nights away. Neither of them knew yet that one slap by one man in front of 112 witnesses was about to detonate the careful country they had built in silence for 3 years. But the architecture of that detonation was already being measured. By her, in the cut of a green dress. By him, in the angle of a mezzanine no guest would think to look at twice. The gala was coming for them both, and it would not leave the world the same. The night of the gala arrived the way large nights arrive in Manhattan, slowly at first, then all at once. By 6 in the evening, the avenue outside the Helmsley Pavilion had become a moving river of black town cars, photographers leaning into the curb with long lenses, and security men with earpieces standing under the canopy like quiet statues. Snow had fallen earlier in the week, and the curb still carried a thin silver crust that crunched under polished shoes. Inside, the gala hall had been transformed into a cathedral of money. 2 long crystal chandeliers hung from the vaulted ceiling, every prism catching the warm gold light and throwing it back in 1,000 soft directions. White orchids spilled from black marble urns at the foot of each column. A string quartet played something old and patient in the corner, the cello breathing low under the violins. Nicole had personally chosen every flower, every chair, every spotlight angle. She had walked this room 4 times in the last 24 hours, kneeling once to fix the hem of a tablecloth herself. In her ear, the security lead from her own production crew confirmed the guest count. 812 confirmed, 3 press credentials approved. 2 had been quietly denied that afternoon for reasons her assistant had not entirely understood. Nicole had understood. Han Do-jin had read the photographer manifest the night before, said nothing, and 2 names had simply vanished from the list by morning. He never explained these things. He never had to. She came down the back stairs at 7:15. The emerald green silk gown moved with her like water in a slow current. The cut followed her waist the way a hand follows a face. Diamonds sat in her ears the size of small tears. Her hair, a polished Hollywood curl at her chin, framed a face that had been painted with the deliberate restraint of someone who did not need help. The staff parted for her without being asked. A waiter dropped his eyes. A florist whispered, "Ms. Richardson." She did not break stride. She only nodded once and adjusted the small earpiece hidden under her curls. "Doors open in 3 minutes," she said softly. "Quartet down half a notch when the first guest crosses the threshold. We are not background music. We are atmosphere." "Yes, ma'am," the floor manager answered in her ear. She turned then, almost without meaning to, and looked up at the VIP mezzanine. He was already there. Han Do-jin stood at the brass railing in a black Italian suit so perfectly cut it seemed less worn than carved. The lighting up there was deliberately dim. He had asked for it that way 2 days earlier, sending the lighting director a 1-line message through an assistant nobody could trace. From the floor of the gala he was barely a silhouette. A long slick of black hair, the suggestion of a sharp jaw, 2 hands resting on the railing, the way a sovereign rests his hands on a balcony. He was looking down at her. Their eyes met for less than a heartbeat. Neither smiled, neither moved. That was the rule. That had always been the rule. In public they were strangers, and being strangers was the most dangerous form of intimacy they had ever practiced. Nicole turned her face away first. He let her. At the four corners of the mezzanine, 4 Korean men in identical black suits stood at parade rest, earpieces in, hands clasped loosely in front. To any guest looking up, they were simply the venue's quiet security detail. They were not. They were his. The doors opened. The first guests crossed the threshold, and the quartet dropped half a notch on cue. The next 90 minutes belonged to Nicole, the curator. She moved through the hall with the calm economy of a conductor working an orchestra she had rehearsed for a year. She greeted an Italian collector with 3 kisses. She steered an heiress away from a journalist she had already flagged as hostile. She paused beside the centerpiece of the auction, a small late Rothko that glowed dark red under its own spotlight, and explained its provenance to a circle of men in tuxedos who listened the way wealthy men sometimes listen when a beautiful woman speaks competently. They listened, and they also looked. Nicole was used to both. She did not look up at the mezzanine again. She did not have to. She could feel him there the way a swimmer feels the floor of a pool change depth under her feet. Twice in the first hour, a waiter approached her with a small folded napkin on a silver tray. She lifted each napkin without breaking conversation, read the single Korean character written on the inside in blue ink, and let her shoulders drop a quarter inch each time. The character meant calm. The character meant I am watching. The character meant the room is mine, not theirs, and you are safe inside it. Then she set the napkin down, smiled at the curator from Madrid she had been speaking with, and continued. Once, near the small bar set up by the western wall, a young heir tried to put his hand on the small of her back to steer her toward a private alcove. She stepped half a pace forward before his palm could land, turned with a polite laugh, and offered him her elbow instead. He did not understand what had been refused. The 2 men in black on the mezzanine had understood it perfectly. One of them had already shifted his weight onto the balls of his feet. The other had let it go, because his daejang had not, by any visible signal, indicated otherwise. The young heir wandered back toward the bar untouched. Nicole moved on. The night, for 90 more minutes, behaved itself. By 9, the auction had begun. Paddles rose, numbers climbed. A bronze sculpture went for 1.4. A small Basquiat drawing went for 3. The room was warm with champagne and the soft electricity of strangers spending money in public. Nicole stood at the side of the stage, tablet in hand, calling subtle corrections into her earpiece. Her green silk caught the chandelier light every time she shifted her weight. That was when Richard Blackwell separated from his group. He had been watching her for 40 minutes, from across the floor, from behind a small column, from the edge of a circle of bankers who had not noticed his attention drift. He had a habit, in rooms like this one, of choosing a woman early in the evening and waiting for her to be unaccompanied. He had built half his second fortune doing it. He had built the other half on oil leases nobody was supposed to be able to buy, and he had stopped, somewhere around 45, being able to tell the difference between the 2 appetites. She felt him before she saw him, a heavier footstep, the smell of old cigar smoke under expensive cologne. He arrived at her elbow holding 2 glasses of champagne, gray hair slicked back, short beard trimmed to a knife edge, the cold, light blue eyes of a man who had spent 58 years being told yes. His tuxedo had been built in London. The watch on his wrist cost more than the Rothko on the wall. Miss Richardson, he offered her one of the glasses. His voice was the slow drawl of inherited oil. I've been told all night that you are the reason this room exists. You've been told correctly. She accepted the glass without drinking from it. Mr. Blackwell, thank you for coming. Richard, Mr. Blackwell, she repeated, gentle and even, the way a teacher corrects a child without humiliating him. He smiled at that. The smile did not reach his eyes. You know my name. I know everyone in this room. It's my job. And what else is your job tonight? He let the question sit too long. His shoulder turned, blocking her path back toward the stage. Because I have watched you for 20 minutes, and I have decided that whatever your firm pays you, it is not enough. I would like to discuss representation, privately. My firm has a card. She slid one between two fingers without looking down and offered it. Email is the fastest line. I don't do email. Then a phone call. She did not move the card. During business hours. Up on the mezzanine, 200 feet away and 20 feet up, Han Do-jin set down his glass on the railing. He did it slowly. He did not move otherwise. One of the 4 Korean men in black turned his head a fraction of an inch, and the other 3, without needing to be told, turned a fraction of an inch with him. The mezzanine had gone very still. Blackwell did not take the card. He let it hang there in the air between them, and the longer it hung, the more obvious it became that he was refusing it. People at the nearest table began to notice. A woman in red lowered her glass. A man with a paddle stopped raising it. I think, Blackwell said, and his voice had dropped a register. You don't understand who is asking. I do. Nicole's voice did not rise. I just don't agree with what you are asking. There is no firm in this city I cannot end with a phone call. Then call them tomorrow. Tonight I am working. He stepped closer. Close enough that she could feel the heat coming off his shirt collar. Close enough that the woman in red set her glass down entirely. You should be flattered. I am not. Most women in your position would be. I am not most women in my position. She held the card steady. Mr. Blackwell, there are 800 people in this room. I would like both of us to walk away from this conversation with our evening intact. The smile finally died on his face. What replaced it was older and uglier, the look of a man who had been told no maybe twice in his life, and had decided, both times, that no was a clerical error. His jaw worked. His hand twitched at his side. Do you know, he said softly, what happens to women who embarrass me in public? I think, Nicole answered, you are about to find out what happens to men who embarrass me in mine. It was a small line. She said it almost kindly. She said it the way a woman closes a door without slamming it, and it was the closing of the door, more than anything she had actually said, that broke him. He moved. The hand came up fast, faster than a 60-year-old man in a tuxedo should have been able to move. The champagne glass tipped out of his other hand and shattered against the marble floor in a high silver note that would later be the thing every witness remembered hearing just before they remembered what they had seen. Nicole did not flinch. She did not step back. Some part of her, the part that had grown up black and brilliant in rooms that had tried to humble her since she was 19, simply lifted her chin a quarter of an inch and held her ground. The slap landed across her left cheek. It landed in a room of 800 people. It landed under 2 crystal chandeliers and a Rothko worth $12 million. It landed in front of 3 press photographers who were already lifting their cameras because they had been watching the body language of the conversation for the last 90 seconds without yet understanding why. It landed on the face of a woman wearing emerald green silk and diamonds the size of small tears. For one long, suspended second, the entire gala held still. The quartet did not stop because the cellist had not yet looked up. A paddle hung frozen in midair. A waiter forgot the tray he was carrying. The flashbulbs began going off a half-second behind real time, white and white and white, against the gold of the chandeliers. Nicole's head turned with the impact, slowly, the way a flower turns on its stem. Her hair moved. The pearl in her left ear caught the light. She did not raise a hand to her cheek. She did not gasp. She closed her eyes for the length of one breath, the way a person closes their eyes when they are deciding something very large and very quiet, and then she opened them again. She did not look at Blackwell. She looked up. Up at the VIP mezzanine. Up at the silhouette at the brass railing. He was already moving. Han Do-jin had not picked the glass back up. He had not spoken to the men at the corners. He had not, in any visible way, given a single order. He had simply stepped away from the railing and turned toward the stairs, one hand sliding into the pocket of his black Italian jacket, the way a man slides his hand into his pocket on a cold morning, almost casually, almost bored, and the 4 Korean men at the 4 corners of the mezzanine were already in motion behind him, and the stairs were a sweep of dark marble polished to a mirror, and the chandeliers above the staircase caught the slow forward shape of him as he began to descend. On the gala floor, Richard Blackwell was still smiling. He had not yet realized what he had done. He turned to the small crowd around him with the half-shrug of a man waiting to be congratulated for putting a woman in her place, and his light blue eyes scanned the room for an approving face, and he did not find one. He found instead the dawning silence. He found the woman in red staring at him with her mouth open. He found the photographers no longer photographing him, but photographing something behind him, something coming down the stairs. The cellist finally looked up. The quartet stopped. And in the new and total silence of the Helmsley Pavilion, 800 of the most powerful people in the Western world heard, very clearly, the sound of a single pair of polished Italian shoes coming down a marble staircase at an unhurried, deliberate, terrifying pace. Nicole had not moved. The print of his hand was rising on her cheek in a shape the photographers would later argue about for weeks. She did not touch it. She kept her eyes on the staircase. Her breath was slow. Her shoulders were down. The emerald silk lay perfectly across her ribs as it rose and fell. Somewhere in the back of the room, a woman whispered, "Oh my God, who is that?" Nobody answered her. Because nobody on that floor, not the curators or the collectors or the heirs or the billionaires, knew yet that the man descending the staircase in the slow black silence was the Daejang of the most powerful Korean mafia empire, quietly buying its way into the bones of the United States. They did not know that the 4 men in black at the 4 corners of the mezzanine had already locked every door of the Helmsley Pavilion. They did not know that the woman in emerald silk had been his wife for 3 years. They were about to. A waiter near the kitchen door dropped a tray of empty flutes. Nobody turned. Nobody could turn. Every head in the Helmsley Pavilion was angled the same direction now, drawn the way iron filings angle toward a magnet they had not known was in the room. The 4 men in black had reached the lower landing. They did not descend behind their Daejang. They fanned out along the base of the staircase in a quiet half-circle, hands clasped, faces unreadable, closing the room without seeming to close it. The shoes reached the bottom step. The flashbulbs began again, faster now, frantic. The photographers no longer aiming at Blackwell, but at the stranger crossing the floor toward him, and somewhere very far away, the cellist set his bow down on his lap with shaking hands, and Richard Blackwell, finally, slowly, like a man hearing a door close in another room, turned around. The chandelier seemed to dim, though no one had touched the lights. It was simply that every eye in the gala had turned toward the same point, and the air itself had thickened around Nicole Richardson's cheek. Her hand was still raised at her side, fingers curled but unclenched, as if she had refused even the dignity of a fist. The emerald silk of her gown trembled once, then stilled. She did not look at Richard Blackwell. She looked at no one. She held her chin where it had landed after the slap, exactly where she had decided it would stay. On the mezzanine, Han Do-jin set his crystal glass on a passing silver tray without looking at the waiter who carried it. The waiter felt the weight leave the tray and felt, at the same instant, something colder enter the room. He took one step forward, into the light of the chandelier, and began, in absolute silence, to walk toward the stairs. The staircase of the gala hall was a long, sweeping curve of white marble, polished to mirror gloss, threaded with a runner of deep wine carpet. 200 people stood between Do-jin and his wife. None of them had yet understood what they were watching, they only sensed it, the way animals sense a shift in barometric pressure before a storm hits the coast. He descended one step, his Italian shoes made no sound. The men in black suits along the perimeter of the room did not move, but the angle of their shoulders changed, the way a wolf pack changes formation without speaking. One of them, near the orchestra pit, lifted a single finger to his earpiece, listened for half a second, and let his hand fall again. The orchestra had already stopped playing. No one could remember when the violins had gone quiet. Dojin descended another step. His face had become something Nicole had never been allowed to see in public, and only rarely in private. The cold, calculating intensity in his almond eyes had hardened into something past calculation. There was no math left in him. There was only arrival. Halfway down the staircase, a small woman in a silver dress, the wife of a senator from Connecticut, stepped accidentally into the line of his descent. She did not see him until she felt the chandelier light leave her shoulders. She turned. She met his eyes for the briefest fraction of a second. Then she moved aside so quickly that her bracelet caught on the marble banister and snapped. Pearls scattered down the steps ahead of him. He walked through them without breaking pace. Each pearl rolled to a halt as he passed, as if even the small white stones understood they were not to be in his way tonight. Near the foot of the staircase, a young photographer hired by the foundation lifted his camera on instinct, then lowered it again without taking the shot. He would tell his grandchildren, decades later, that he had been the only person in the room who chose, in that moment, not to record. He would say he had felt that a photograph would have been a kind of trespass, and that the man crossing the marble had not been a man one was permitted to photograph without consent. He had not yet learned the name. He only knew the rule. Blackwell stood beside Nicole with his hand still slightly raised from the strike, his palm still warm. His tuxedo was perfect. His gray hair was perfect. His $1,000,000 watch caught the chandelier and threw a small constellation across the marble. He was smiling the smile of a man who had just done something irreversible and had not yet realized it. His advisors, 3 of them in custom black, stood frozen behind him, mouths slightly open, eyes already racing ahead to consequence. A whisper began at the back of the crowd. "Who is that? Who is that man?" The whisper traveled across the room in a wave. It reached the foot of the stairs before Dojin did. He arrived on the marble floor. He did not hurry. He crossed the open space between the staircase and the spot where Nicole stood, and the crowd parted before him without being asked, dresses and tuxedos pressing back into themselves, leaving a corridor of light. He passed a woman in sapphire who would later swear she felt the temperature drop 2 degrees as he moved through. He passed a senator who would not, in the morning, be able to recall his own name. He stopped 3 feet from Richard Blackwell. He did not look at Nicole first. That was the discipline of 3 years. He looked at the man. "Did you," he said, very quietly, in English flawless enough to slice, "just slap her?" The words were not a question. They were a verdict, pronounced before the trial. Blackwell laughed. It was a short laugh, a laugh of a man who had spent 58 years believing the world reorganized itself around his amusement. "Excuse me," he said. "I don't think this concerns you, friend. The lady and I were having a—" Dojin moved. It was not fast in the way street violence is fast. It was fast in the way surgery is fast. His right hand left his side, crossed the 3 feet of marble air, and closed around Richard Blackwell's throat, not gripping. Not yet. Simply placed there, palm cool against the soft skin under the jaw, fingers spread wide enough to span the full breadth of the billionaire's neck. The custom black sleeve of Dojin's Italian suit rode up 1/2 an inch and revealed the lower edge of a discreet black tattoo climbing toward his wrist. Blackwell's laugh died inside his mouth. "I asked you," Dojin said, in the same level voice, "a question." Then he lifted. It was the lift that broke the room. 6 feet of American billionaire, 220 pounds of old money, and gym-built shoulders came off the marble floor by a single inch, then 2, then 4. Held there by one Korean hand, Blackwell's polished shoes dangled, his knees bent in surprise. His hands came up reflexively to scrape at the wrist holding him, and Dojin did not flinch, did not adjust his stance, did not even shift his weight. He held a grown man in the air the way another man might hold a wine glass. Somewhere in the crowd, a woman dropped a champagne flute. The sound of crystal shattering on marble was the loudest noise in the world for 1 full second. Then there was silence again. Nicole had not moved. Her eyes had finally come up. They rested on her husband's face, not on the man dangling from his hand. She did not look afraid, she did not look surprised. She looked, for the first time in 3 years of public anonymity, like a woman watching her own name return to her. Blackwell tried to speak. The hand at his throat was loose enough to let blood through, not loose enough to let pride through. A sound came out of him that was not language. "Look at her," Dojin said. Blackwell's eyes, wild now, found Nicole. "Look at her face," Dojin said. "Look at the mark you put on it." The handprint had begun to rise across Nicole's cheekbone, faint and pink, in the shape of a hand that had once been very sure of itself. Blackwell looked. Something in his expression collapsed in stages. The arrogance went first, then the calculation. Then, a man who had not, in 4 decades of business, been physically held accountable for anything, realized that he was being held accountable now, in front of every camera that mattered. Phones had come out across the gala, hundreds of them lifted in trembling hands. Dojin did not look at the phones. He had stopped caring about the phones the moment Blackwell's palm had touched his wife's face. "You will get on your knees," Dojin said. His voice was almost gentle. "You will get on your knees, and you will ask my wife for forgiveness. And if your forgiveness is not granted, then what happens next will happen, do you understand?" He lowered Blackwell 6 inches. The billionaire's toes brushed the marble, then his soles. Then his knees buckled the rest of the way down without resistance, as if gravity had been waiting for permission. Dojin's hand stayed on his throat all the way down, guiding the descent, until Blackwell knelt in his own custom tuxedo on the marble floor of his own gala, beneath the chandelier he had paid the foundation to install. Then Dojin released him. Blackwell did not move. He stayed where he had been put. His hands rested on his thighs. His mouth opened and closed. The hand that had struck Nicole lay open on his knee, palm up, as if he could no longer remember what hands were for. Dojin turned. He turned for the first time since arriving on the marble. He turned to his wife. He did not touch her. He did not need to. He stood in front of her at a distance she had drawn, 3 years ago, in the kitchen of their penthouse, when she had told him that in public she would be respected as a curator before she was loved as a wife. He honored the distance now. He only looked. "Are you hurt?" he said, in Korean, soft enough that only she would hear it. Nicole answered in English, because the cameras were there, and because she had decided in the half-second of his arrival exactly what kind of woman she would be from this night forward. "No," she said. Then, in Korean, low, "I am all right, my love." Something in Dojin's face moved. It was not a smile, it was the relaxation of a single muscle near the corner of his mouth, the only relaxation any of his men had seen in him for 9 years. Then it was gone, and he turned again and faced the room. He did not raise his voice. He did not need to. "My name," he said, "is Han Dojin." A second wave of whispers crossed the gala. The name traveled differently from the first. The first whisper had been, "Who is he?" The second whisper was, "Oh God." "This woman," he said. And now he gestured, a small, precise movement of his open palm toward Nicole, "is my wife. Her name is Nicole Richardson. She has been my wife for 3 years. She has chosen, during that time, to be known to the world for her own work, not mine. Tonight, that choice was taken from her." He paused. He looked at the crowd. He looked at the men in black against the walls, who had not moved, who would not move unless he wished it. He looked at Blackwell, kneeling. "From this moment," he said, "she belongs to herself, and to me, and to no man's hand. Anyone in this room who forgets that will be reminded. Anyone who tells this story will tell it with her name spelled correctly. Do we understand one another?" It was not a question either. The gala, 200 of the wealthiest and most powerful people on the eastern seaboard, did not answer in words. The room answered with a small collective movement, a shift of weight, a half-bow of heads from collectors and senators, and old money matriarchs who had been raised to recognize, without needing to be told, who in any room was the man who could not be refused. The understanding moved through them like a single breath. Dojin turned back to Blackwell. "Speak," he said. Blackwell's mouth worked. A sound came, then a word, then a sentence that did not entirely belong to him. "I am sorry," he said. His voice was a cracked imitation of itself. "Mrs. Han, I am so sorry. I did not know. I did not. Forgive me. Please, forgive me." The Mrs. Han landed in the room and rearranged every other name in it. Nicole considered him for a long moment. The handprint on her cheek had darkened. She did not touch it. She let the room see it. She let the cameras see it. She let the photograph that would, by morning, be on the front page of every newspaper in 3 countries, be the photograph of her face exactly as he had left it. "You have asked," she said. Her voice was clear and unhurried, the voice she used to open auctions. "I have heard you." She did not say "I forgive you." She did not say "I do not." She left him there inside the question, where he would live for the rest of his nights, and she turned her shoulder very slightly toward her husband instead. Dojin offered his arm. She placed her gloved hand on it. The contact was small, the contact was complete. 3 years of careful distance, of doorways entered separately, of elevators ridden alone, of restaurant tables booked under 2 surnames, ended in 1 square inch of emerald silk pressed against a black Italian sleeve. The crowd saw it. The crowd would not, for the rest of their lives, unsee it. A photographer near the entrance finally raised his camera. The shutter clicked once. He braced for one of the men in black to move toward him. None of them did. Dojin had decided, somewhere in the last 60 seconds, that the photograph would exist. He had decided that the photograph was the point. They walked. They walked the length of the corridor the crowd had opened, and the crowd did not close behind them, because no one yet had the courage to stand in the space where they had passed. The men in black suits along the walls fell into formation without signal. 2 ahead, 2 behind, 4 at the doors. The orchestra, somewhere, did not begin to play again. The chandelier burned on alone. At the threshold of the gala hall, Nicole paused. She did not look back at Blackwell, still on his knees on the marble. She looked, instead, at the long room of her peers, at the curators and collectors and heiresses who had watched her for 3 years and never once known her name belonged to a king. She let them see her face. She let them see the mark and the emerald gown and the woman inside both. Then she turned and stepped out into the New York night, on the arm of the husband she would never again be required to hide. A black car was already waiting, its rear door open, its engine running, its driver standing at attention without expression. Dojin guided her in with the same hand he had used, 90 seconds earlier, to suspend a billionaire by the throat. He guided her with the gentleness of a man handling the only thing in the world he had ever been afraid to break. He closed the door. He walked around. He climbed in beside her. Inside the car, in the soft amber of the cabin light, he finally allowed himself to look at her cheek. He raised his hand. He did not touch the mark. He hovered his fingertips half an inch from her skin, as if afraid even his shadow would press against it. "Nicole," he said. "I know," she said. She took his hand and pulled it the rest of the way to her face. She held his palm against the place where another man's palm had been, and the new heat replaced the old heat, and something in her shoulders, something she had been carrying since the moment Blackwell's hand had moved, finally set itself down. The car began to move. Behind them, on the marble floor of the gala, the most powerful oilman in America was still on his knees, and the most powerful elite in the country were still standing in a silent corridor that had not yet closed, and across the room, every phone in every trembling hand was already uploading the same 14 seconds of footage to every server in the world. By morning, the name Han would mean something it had not meant the day before. In every newspaper, in every boardroom, in every drawing room from Manhattan to Seoul. By morning, the name Nicole Richardson would no longer belong to a curator who quietly organized other people's galas. It would belong to a queen the world had not known existed until a billionaire had lifted his hand and learned, on national television, exactly whose wife he had touched. In the back of the car, Do-jin pressed his forehead very gently to hers. He spoke a single sentence in Korean, low enough that the driver could not hear, soft enough that only she would carry it. She closed her eyes, and for the first time in 3 years, she did not need to hide her smile. The morning came without permission. Nicole opened her eyes to a ceiling she had stared at 1,000 times. But the silence in the room was a different silence. It pressed against the windows. It hummed under the door. It sat on the foot of the bed like a stranger who had let himself in during the night. Do-jin was already awake. He sat in the armchair by the window, his back straight, a tablet resting on his knee. He had not slept. She could tell by the cup of black tea beside him, still full, gone cold. He had been watching the city the way a captain watches a sea he has already decided to cross. On the floor at the foot of the bed sat a neat stack of newspapers. A maid had brought them up before dawn. Do-jin had asked for every paper, every language, every tabloid. He wanted Nicole to see the world before the world arrived at her door. She sat up slowly. The emerald gown from the night before was draped on a chair, the silk pooled like spilled water. Her bare feet touched the floor. She walked to the newspapers without a word. The first headline punched her in the chest. Daejang in Manhattan. Korean mafia king has a secret wife. The second was worse. Who is Nicole Richardson? The curator who brought a billionaire to his knees. The third had her photograph beneath the fold. The emerald gown. The chandelier light catching her cheekbone. Do-jin's hand at the back of Richard Blackwell's neck. The shot had been taken by a guest. The world now had it. Nicole did not cry. She did not gasp. She lowered herself onto the edge of the bed and pressed her palms flat against the silk of her robe, the way one presses a wound to slow the blood. "How many?" she said. Do-jin did not look up from his tablet. Every paper in New York. 7 in Seoul, 4 in London, 2 in Tokyo. Le Figaro picked it up at 5 this morning, Der Spiegel at 6. And the gallery, 300 messages on the foundation line since midnight, 42 interview requests, 6 of them are credible. She nodded slowly. She had organized the gala of the year. She had curated the most expensive private auction in the city, and in one single night, none of that was what anyone wanted to talk about anymore. They wanted to talk about her ring finger. Do-jin set the tablet aside. He rose from the armchair and crossed the room without sound. He knelt in front of her, one knee on the carpet, the way a man kneels at an altar. He took her hands in his. His hands were warm. They were always warm. "Nicole, don't. Look at me." She looked at him. The morning light cut across his face in a single clean line. His dark eyes held no apology. They held something heavier than apology. They held a decision. "You told me last night," she said, "that I would walk into rooms differently now. You did not tell me I would never walk into a room alone again. You will never need to. That is not the same thing." He nodded once. He understood the difference. He had always understood the difference. That was the cruelty of him. He understood everything and changed nothing. "I built a career," she said. Her voice did not shake. It carried the steady weight of a woman who had rehearsed her own grief in her own mirror, brick by brick, for 10 years, without a name behind me, without your name, without anyone's name. And this morning the world looked at my career and saw a wife. The world is wrong. The world does not care. He brought her hands to his lips. He kissed her knuckles, once, slowly, with a reverence that had nothing to do with theater. There was no audience here. There was only her. "Then we will teach the world to care," he said. "We will teach it the right way." She pulled her hands back. Gently, she stood. She walked to the window. Down on the avenue, the morning traffic was already heavy. She could not see the photographers from the 82nd floor, but she knew they were there. She had counted 3 black vans on the corner of Park before the sun came up. "I need air," she said. "You will have it. I need to walk to my own gallery. You will walk. Without an army behind me." He did not answer that one. He came to stand beside her at the window. He did not touch her. He let her have the space the way a man lets a wild horse have a paddock. He understood she was not running. She was deciding. 3 years, she said. 3 years, I had a life that was mine. Mine alone. Even when I was yours, the rest of it was mine. And now? Now you have more. Now I have less. He was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, in Korean, soft enough that only she could hear, "Then I will make the world smaller, until what you have is exactly what you want." She closed her eyes. She did not say thank you. She did not need to. Downstairs, in a study 3 floors below the master bedroom, 2 men in dark suits were already at work. They had arrived at 4 in the morning. They had not removed their jackets. One of them was on a phone speaking quiet Korean. The other was reading a thick folder bound in plain black cloth. The folder belonged to Richard Blackwell. It had been compiled over 6 months, long before the gala. Do-jin had begun the compilation the first time Blackwell had touched Nicole's shoulder at a charity dinner in March. He had not mentioned it to her. He had not needed to. The folder had simply existed, the way a knife exists in a drawer, waiting for the day someone reached for it. This morning, at 6:15, Do-jin had reached. The first phone call went to Singapore. A private bank that held the operational liquidity of Blackwell's holding company received a request from a Korean trust. The request was simple: withdraw, all of it, by the end of the business day. The second phone call went to Geneva. A custodian who managed a discreet portfolio of art, held in lieu of certain debts, received instructions to call those debts. The art belonged to Blackwell. The debts had been quietly purchased in February. The custodian did not ask questions. He had been paid not to. The third phone call went to Houston. A drilling consortium that supplied 3 of Blackwell's 6 active fields was informed that their primary lender had been acquired overnight. The new lender required immediate renegotiation of terms. Immediate meant by noon. The fourth phone call went to a senator in Washington who had taken Blackwell's money for 9 years. The senator was informed that a different envelope of money, larger, cleaner, would arrive at his campaign by Friday if he was prepared to take a public position on offshore tax compliance. He was prepared. By the time Nicole sat down to her coffee on the terrace, 3 of Blackwell's 10 largest revenue streams had stopped breathing. He did not yet know. Do-jin joined her on the terrace. He did not mention any of it. He poured her coffee himself, the way he always did. He sat across from her with the morning paper folded in half so the photograph faced down. "I have a request," she said. "Anything. Do not buy me a museum to apologize." He smiled. It was a small smile, the kind he kept for her. "I would never apologize with real estate." "Yes, you would." "I would never apologize with a small one." She laughed. It surprised her. The laugh came out of her like a window opening in a stuffy room. She covered her mouth with the back of her hand. "There she is," he said quietly. "Don't." "There she is." She set the cup down. She looked at him across the table, this man who had walked down a marble staircase last night and lifted a billionaire by the throat in front of 400 witnesses for her. This man who had then poured her coffee at 7 in the morning, the way a husband pours coffee in a house, in a quiet town, somewhere very far from any of this. "I am not ready to be photographed every time I leave a building," she said. "You will not be." "How?" "Because the photographers will lose interest in 2 weeks. They will not. They will, when the only photographs they can sell are of a woman walking calmly into her gallery and walking calmly out of her gallery. The story they want is a meltdown. We will not give them a meltdown. We will give them dignity." Dignity does not sell papers for long. She studied him. You have done this before. I have done a version of it. For whom? For people who did not deserve it. You deserve it. She drank her coffee. The city was waking up around them, soft and gray and enormous. She thought about the gallery. She thought about the staff who would arrive at 9. She thought about the intern who had wept happy tears at the close of the auction last night and would arrive this morning to a different building, a different boss, a different center of gravity. She would have to walk in there and be the same woman she was at 6 in the evening yesterday, the woman who held a clipboard and corrected the lighting on a Rothko, even though by sunrise, the world had decided she was someone else. I am going to work, she said. I know, by myself. You will not be by yourself, but you will feel as if you are. She nodded. That was the marriage. That had always been the marriage. She stood. She kissed the top of his head as she passed his chair. He caught her wrist, briefly, and pressed his mouth to the inside of it. A small private thing. A coin slipped from his hand to hers under the table of the world. 2 hours later, she walked into her gallery on West 24th Street in a cream wool coat and dark sunglasses. A car had let her out at the corner, not at the door. She had walked the last 15 meters herself. 11 cameras fired. She did not flinch. She did not smile. She walked exactly as she had walked into that gallery every morning for the last 7 years, with a coffee in one hand and a phone in the other, and she pushed the door open with her shoulder the way she always did. Inside, the staff had gathered without being asked, 12 of them. They stood in a loose half-circle near the front desk. The intern who had cried last night now looked at Nicole as though she were about to deliver a verdict. Nicole set the coffee down. She removed the sunglasses. She placed them on the desk. "Good morning," she said. "Good morning," they answered, ragged, uncertain. "I know what you read this morning. I know what you saw last night. I am going to say this once, and then we are going to go back to work. Because we have a Carrington estate arriving on Thursday, and none of you have looked at the manifest." A small, nervous laugh moved through them. "My name is Nicole Richardson. It has been Nicole Richardson for 30 years. It will be Nicole Richardson for the next 30. The man you saw last night is my husband. He has been my husband for 3 years. He is not the reason this gallery exists. He is not the reason any of you have a job. The reason this gallery exists is on those walls. The reason any of you have a job is in this room right now, and her name is on the door." She paused. She let them see her. "Nothing changes here. Not the calendar, not the standards, not the way we treat the artists, the lenders, the buyers, the cleaning staff, or each other. If anyone calls this office and asks about my marriage, you say, 'The gallery does not comment on private matters,' and you hang up. If anyone tries to walk in here with a camera, you say, 'This is a private business,' and you walk them out. If any of you needs an afternoon today, because your mother called you crying, take it. Come back tomorrow. I will be here." She picked up the sunglasses. She picked up the coffee. Now, the manifest. The intern wiped her face with the back of her hand and went to the desk. That night, Nicole came home at 9. Dojin was in the study. He did not ask her how it had been. He poured her a glass of red wine. He led her to the long sofa by the window. He took off her shoes himself, one at a time, and set them aside. He lifted her feet into his lap. He pressed his thumbs into the arch of her right foot until she made a small sound that was not quite a word. "Tell me about Blackwell," she said. "Tomorrow. Now." He looked at her for a long moment. Then he told her. He told her about Singapore, about Geneva, about Houston, about the senator. He told her in the same even voice he used when he ordered tea. He did not embellish. He did not hide. He laid the day on the table between them, the way a butler lays out a meal. She listened. She did not interrupt. When he finished, she was quiet for a long time. She drank her wine. She watched the lights of the city move outside the glass. "How long?" she finally said. "Before what?" "Before he has nothing left." 11 days. Perhaps 12. The art in Geneva will take longer to settle. But the operating cash, the fields, the credit lines, by the end of next week, he will be a man who owns a tuxedo and a watch. And the tuxedo? He smiled, just slightly. Rented. She closed her eyes. She did not feel triumph. She did not feel pity. She felt the strange, level quiet of a woman who had been struck in front of 400 witnesses and was now watching, from a great calm height, the slow, careful dismantling of the hand that had struck her. Dojin. Yes. I do not want to know the details of the next 11 days. You will not. But I do not want you to stop. I will not. She opened her eyes. She looked at him. He held her gaze without blinking. He had heard her. He had heard the woman, and he had heard the wife, and he had heard the curator, and he had heard, underneath all of those, the girl from a long time ago who had once promised herself she would never be slapped in a room full of strangers and live in fear afterward. He lifted her hand. He pressed her wedding ring, the one she still wore on a chain under her shirt, to his lips. Sleep, he said. Soon. Sleep, my love. She let her head fall against the back of the sofa. Outside, the city kept moving, full of papers and cameras, and people who thought they now knew her name. Inside, a man with a discreet tattoo climbing the side of his neck pressed her foot, slowly, patiently, the way one tends to something precious that has been walked on all day. He would not stop. Not the foot, not the 11 days, not any of it. She did not need to ask him twice. Hours later, she woke briefly in the dark. The sofa was empty. A blanket had been draped over her. From the study down the hall came the low cadence of Do-jin's voice on a call, speaking Korean, then English, then Korean again. She did not move. She listened to the rhythm of it, the steady, patient pressure of a man shaking a country apart, one polite phone call at a time. She closed her eyes. She slept again. In the morning, there would be more headlines, and there would be more questions, and there would be more cameras at the corner of Park. But there would also be a coffee on the terrace, and a husband who poured it himself, and a gallery on West 24th Street that opened at 9 sharp because she said so. The world had learned her name. It would now learn what she did with it. 6 weeks after the gala, Richard Blackwell came back. He did not come the way men of his kind usually return. There were no lawyers behind him, no press release, no gold cufflinks catching the light. He came on foot, in a coat that was a season too thin, with a driver who waited 2 blocks away because the address on the card was not one a private driver was permitted to approach. The address was Nicole's new gallery office on West 24th Street. A small place, deliberately small, 3 rooms above a framing shop. She had taken the lease the morning the museum project was announced because she wanted a room of her own that did not belong to her husband's empire, did not belong to the foundation board, did not belong to anyone but her. The buzzer rang at 4 in the afternoon. Her assistant looked at the monitor, then looked at Nicole. The girl's face did not know what to do. Mr. Blackwell is downstairs, she said. He says he has no appointment. He says he understands. He's asking if you would see him for 2 minutes. Nicole was at her desk. A draft of the museum's opening catalog lay open in front of her, marked in red pencil. She did not lift her head right away. She finished the line she was reading. She put the pencil down with care. She closed the catalog. Send him up, she said. Alone. No coat downstairs. No bag. Search him in the lobby. If he refuses, send him away. The assistant nodded and made the calls. 2 minutes later, Blackwell stepped through the office door, and the room rearranged itself around him. He was smaller. That was the first thing. Not physically smaller. Not really. But the volume around him had collapsed. The arrogance that had once entered a room before he did was gone. His gray hair was still slicked back, but a strand had come loose at the temple, and he had not noticed. His beard was still trimmed, but the trim was a week old, maybe 2. The cold, light blue eyes had a film over them that had not been there at the gala. They had learned what fear felt like, and they had not been able to wash it out. He stopped just inside the doorway. He did not sit. He had not been invited to. "Mrs. Hahn," he said. Nicole let the silence answer for her. "I came," he began, and his voice cracked on the word, and he cleared it, and tried again. "I came to ask if you would hear me out for 2 minutes. Then I'll leave. Whatever you decide, I'll leave." She gestured, one hand, to the chair across from her desk. He sat too quickly. His knees did not know how to be casual anymore. He pressed his palms onto his thighs to stop them from trembling, and the gesture made the trembling visible. "I lost the Permian holdings," he said, 3 weeks ago. Sold below market because the bank pulled the line. I lost the Houston Tower the week before that. The board removed me from the foundation in Aspen. My wife filed in Connecticut on Monday. My son will not take my calls. My driver of 19 years quit because his sister works at the gallery you used to run, and she told him what I did, and he could not look at me anymore. He swallowed. "I am not here to ask you to fix any of that. I know who fixed it. I know it cannot be unfixed. And I am here because I have spent 6 weeks trying to live with what I did to you at that gala, and I cannot. I struck a woman in front of 1,000 people. I struck you because you were correct and I was not, and I could not bear being told no by a black woman in a green dress in front of people I had bought drinks for since 1987. That is the truth of it. I have said it to my therapist. I have said it to my priest. I have not said it to you, so I am saying it to you now." He looked at the carpet. "I'm sorry," he said. "I'm so deeply sorry. I have no right to ask your forgiveness. I am asking it anyway, because I do not know what else to do with the rest of my life if I do not ask." The room held very still. Nicole did not move for a long moment. She let him sit in the sound of his own apology. She let him hear it back. She let it dry on the air. Then she stood. She walked around the desk. She did not sit on the edge of it. She did not lean. She stood in front of him, the way a curator stands in front of a piece that has been brought in for appraisal and has been found to be not what the seller claimed. "Mr. Blackwell," she said, "look at me." He raised his head. His eyes were wet. "You did not strike me because I told you no," she said. "You struck me because for 40 years no one had. You walked into that gala believing the room belonged to you. You believed my body belonged to the room. You believed my husband, whoever he was, would be a man you could outbid. You were wrong on every count, and when you discovered you were wrong, you did the only thing your training had ever taught you to do. You hit the thing that had embarrassed you." She let that sit. "You are not sorry for what you did," she said. "You are sorry for what it cost you. Those are different sorrows. The first one rebuilds a man. The second one only buries him." He flinched. He did not argue. "I will not forgive you today," she said. "I may not forgive you ever. That is not a wound. That is a fact. You made your choice that night, with your hand in the air, in front of witnesses. The world has answered. I am not the appeals court." She walked to the door and opened it. "Go home, Mr. Blackwell. Whatever home you have left, do not write me. Do not send flowers. Do not appear at any opening I attend. If you see me on the street, cross it. That is the kindness I am extending. Take it." He stood. His legs were not steady. He moved toward the door with the slowness of a man walking into weather. At the threshold, he stopped. He did not turn around. "Thank you," he said, "for the 2 minutes." Then he was gone. Nicole closed the door. She stood with her hand on the wood for a count of 10. Then she walked back to her desk, picked up the red pencil, and finished the line she had been editing when the buzzer rang. That night, she did not tell Do-jin. He learned within the hour because he learned everything within the hour, but he did not raise it at dinner. He poured her wine. He asked her about the catalog. He listened to her describe a Basquiat the museum had secured on loan from a private estate in Lagos. When she finally mentioned that Blackwell had come, he set down his fork and listened until she was finished. Then he picked the fork back up. "You handled it correctly," he said. I know, she said. Would you like me to make sure he does not come back? She looked at him across the candles. She thought about it for the length of a sip of wine. He won't come back, she said. He saw what I am now. He won't make that mistake twice. Do-jin nodded once. The matter was closed. The museum opened on a Thursday in October. She had wanted Thursday on purpose. Friday was for parties. Saturday was for crowds. Thursday was for the people who actually wanted to look at art. The press, of course, came anyway, and the crowd came anyway, and the parties chased the press, but the building itself opened on the day she had chosen, and that was the point. The Han Richardson Foundation Museum of Contemporary African Diaspora stood on the corner of Madison and 79th. 6 stories, white stone facade, a bronze door cast in Dakar from a single mold that had taken 11 months to make. Above the door, in a letter form Nicole had commissioned from a typographer in Accra, the museum's name in English on the left and in Korean on the right. The Korean was small. Most visitors would not notice it for a year, but it was there, because she had asked for it to be there. She arrived at 6. The press had been camped on the sidewalk since 2. They surged when the car door opened. Flashes hit the limestone like weather. Her name was shouted in 4 languages: Mrs. Han, Madam Richardson, curator, Daejang's wife. Each one a different door someone had tried to push her through. She did not turn to any of them. She wore the emerald gown. It was not the same gown. The first had been retired the morning after the gala, sealed in archival tissue, locked in a closet she had not opened since. This one had been made for tonight. The same color, exact to the shade, because she had asked the atelier to match it from a swatch she had cut from the seam of the first. The cut was different. The neckline was higher. The sleeves were longer. The silhouette was the silhouette of a woman who had nothing left to prove, which is a different silhouette than the one she had worn 6 weeks ago. The alianza was on her finger, on the outside, where everyone could see. She walked the carpet without stopping. She did not pose. She did not wave. She walked the way a person walks into a building they have built, which is to say, she walked as if the cameras were a kind of weather she had dressed for. At the door she paused. She turned. She raised one hand to the crowd of reporters, palm open, the way a queen acknowledges a road she has chosen not to take. Then she stepped inside. The lobby was full. 200 guests, hand-selected. Curators from the Tate, from MoMA, from the Pompidou, from the Zeitz, collectors who had flown from Sao Paulo and Johannesburg and Riyadh, artists, writers, 3 professors from Howard who had taught her when she was 19, her mother in the front, in a navy dress, holding a glass of water because she did not drink and never had, her father beside her, in a suit he had bought for the wedding he had not been told about and had been forgiven for not attending, because there had been no wedding to attend. Nicole crossed to her parents first. She kissed her mother on the cheek. She held her father's hand for a beat longer than she had to. Then she turned and walked to the small stage at the center of the lobby, and the room went quiet without being asked. She did not use notes. "Thank you for coming," she said. "This building is not a monument. It is a workroom." The art inside it was made by people who were told their work was not art. The art on these walls was made by people who were told their hands were not the right hands. I built this room so that those hands could rest here for a while, and be seen, and be paid, and be archived properly, in the climate they deserve. A small laugh moved through the room at the word climate. The collectors recognized it. "I want to thank one person publicly tonight," she said, "because for 3 years he asked to be thanked privately, and tonight is not a private night." She looked up to the mezzanine. He was already there. Do-jin stood at the rail of the second-floor balcony, alone. No capangas at the corners, no earpiece visible, a single black Italian suit, a white silk shirt without a tie, the discreet watch she had given him for their first anniversary. His hair was slicked back as it had always been. The small black tattoo climbed the side of his neck and disappeared into the collar, as it had always done. He was not guarding the room, he was attending it. 3 years ago, Nicole said, her voice steady. "I married a man who agreed to disappear so that my career would belong to me. He did that for 3 years without complaint. He did it well. He did it so well that when the world finally noticed him, it did not believe he existed. Tonight, I would like the record to show that he exists, that he chose me, that I chose him, and that this museum opens with both of our names on the foundation that built it, because that was the agreement, even when only one name was visible on the door." She lifted her glass. "To Han Do-jin," she said, "my husband. Welcome to the room." The applause did not start at the front. It started at the back, where the artists were standing, and it moved forward in a wave, and by the time it reached the stage, it was the kind of applause that has decided something on its way across a room. Dojin did not bow. He did not wave. He inclined his head, once, the smallest movement, and the room understood that the acknowledgement had been received. He came down the stairs slowly, not the way he had come down the stairs at the gala. There was no menace in this descent. There was no silence pulling behind him like a coat. He came down the way a man comes home after a long shift, with the keys already in his hand. At the bottom of the stairs, he crossed the lobby to her. The guests parted without being told, because some part of everybody in that room understood that this was a moment they had been allowed to witness, not invited to participate in. He stopped in front of her. He looked at her for a beat. Then he leaned down and pressed his lips to her forehead, the same place he had pressed them on the rooftop 3 years ago, and on 1,000 mornings since. And the cameras caught it, and the world saw, and Nicole did not flinch. "You did well, my love," he said, low, in English, for her only. "The room belongs to you." "It belongs to us," she said. "No," he said. "Tonight it is yours. Tomorrow we can argue about it." She laughed, and the laugh was the first laugh of the new life. Later, after the speeches and the toasts and the long, slow walk through the galleries with the curators from the Tate, after her mother had been put into a car with a thermos of decaf and a kiss on both cheeks, after the last collector had been handed a catalog and the last reporter had been ushered out the bronze door, Nicole and Do-jin stepped out onto Madison Avenue alone. The street was wet. It had rained while they were inside. The lamps doubled themselves in the pavement. The air smelled of cold stone and exhaust, and the faint sweetness of the chestnut cart at the corner. The security Froda was there, but at a distance. 2 black SUVs at the end of the block. A third idling on 79th. Earpieces, but no visible weapons. The men knew their job tonight was to be furniture. Expensive, attentive, invisible furniture. Do-jin offered his arm. Nicole took it. They walked. They walked the way 2 people walk when they have nothing to prove to the sidewalk. Past the closed boutiques. Past the doormen who tipped their caps because they had seen the news and now they had seen her face, and the 2 facts had clicked together in their hands. Past a bus shelter with her photograph on the side panel, an advertisement for the museum, the emerald gown, the chandelier light, her name in the typeface from Accra. She looked at it as she passed. She did not stop. At 76th Street, Do-jin slowed. He leaned in close to her ear and murmured something in Korean. 3 words. Soft, old. The kind of phrase a man uses with a woman when there is no one listening and the night belongs to them. She did not translate it for the cameras that were not there. She did not translate it for anyone. She tucked it into the place where she kept the things that were hers, and she smiled. It was the smile of a queen who no longer needed to hide her kingdom. The security cars rolled forward at walking pace, far enough behind to be invisible, close enough to be inevitable. Manhattan moved around them, indifferent and luminous, and the 2 of them walked into it side by side, the curator and the daejang, the wife and the husband, the woman in the emerald gown, and the man with the small black tattoo climbing his neck, and the city, for the first time in 3 years, knew exactly who they were. And for the first time in 3 years, they did not have to pretend it did not.
If the story stayed with you even after the screen went dark, know this, it doesn't end here. Our private community is the extension of this channel. Every story ad-free. No interruptions. No breaks in the atmosphere. Bonus scenes and extra chapters the public version doesn't show. And for the inner circle, one of our 3 tiers, one brand new exclusive full-length story every month. Plus the sensual chapters reserved only for the chair you're sitting in. 3 doors in. Scan the QR code on your screen. Tap the link in the pinned comment, or follow the link in the description below. Your name belongs on the next page.
If this story moved you, stop for a moment and reflect. Have you ever built something brilliant with your own hands, only to have a man with money try to put a price on your dignity in front of a room full of strangers? Have you ever loved someone in silence for years, knowing that the day the world found out, everything you protected would change forever? And if a single hand on a billionaire's throat could rewrite your story tonight, would you let it? Or would you choose to walk through that door yourself, in your emerald gown, with your head higher than every chandelier in the room? Tell us your experiences and feelings in the comments. We read them all. And if you believe in stories about dignity, devotion, and hidden power, leave a like, be sure to subscribe to the channel, and click join to become a part of our community and help the channel.